Hello everybody, my name is Luigi Pegao. I'm a graphic designer and a photographer, and in this video tutorial I'm going to look at a tutorial that another YouTuber, Shadiversity, made to make a fantasy map. And I thought his tutorial was a little bit too hard to follow, sorry. I'm going to use some modified techniques of his. So basically we've created a new document. This is one by 3600 by 2400 pixels, the same size as a A4 piece of paper. What we need to go is to layers, and with both black and white selected for foreground and background color, we're going to go to filter, render, clouds, and we're going to double click this layer, and we're going to call it clouds. Now we're going to make a new layer on top of that using this little button here, create new layer, and this time we're going to pick a grey color like that, something middle of the road. We're going to use the paint bucket tool and we're going to fill that in, and let's rename this to hard mix. So with the hard mix selected, hard mix layer selected, we're going to change its transfer style to hard mix. Now we get something image close to that. So to fine tune this, to make some edits, what we can do is we're going to click on the clouds layer, this layer here, and we're going to use the burn and dodge tools. So we're going to select burn, you have like a little finger mark, and the exposure we're going to set to about 100. So to create some shapes, we can adjust the size of the burn brush using the square bracket keys on our keyboard. And if we paint on the clouds layer, like I'm doing, we can create some shapes. And let's just create something quickly. So we're using the burn tool to remove the landmass. Black in this instance will play the role as water, and white will be the landmass, and we're using the burn tool to remove it subtly. And if we want to bring in some of the landmass, we change it to the dodge tool, set exposure to about 100, and we can paint some more landmass in. If you want to delete some of the side land masses, all I simply do is we're going to create a black brush, we're going to make it big, and we're just going to paint it over there. Okay, this is my finished landmass for the purpose of this tutorial. Okay, so what we're going to do now is with the clouds layer selected, we're going to go to select, color range, and we're going to select the white there, sample colors, and since it's a black and white image, we're not going to have too much trouble with the fuzziness. Clicked OK, and you see that it's done a fairly good job of selecting our landmass. We're going to save this selection, go to select, save selection, we're going to call it landmass selection. This may come in handy for future use. So we've got that. Okay, unselected. Now we're going to create another new layer upon the hard mix, and let's just call it, going to go select, load selection. I'm going to change the channel to landmass selection, what we created so far. And let's go for the color picker. Let's choose something a green color, and let's use the paint bucket tool like that, and we unselected, and what we've done is created a landmass. And the reason why we created a new layer to do this is so that if we change our minds and we want to fix something, we can go back to original layers, do some edits with our burning and our dodge tool, and we can create a new selection and do it that way. So it's non-destructive. So if we zoom out, we can see that there are like little tiny white specks around the green, but if we zoom in, we'll see that it's sort of like a rough kind of effect. Now we can fix this simply by clicking on the color layer, going to layer style and adding a stroke. And we're going to add a blue color, and this will be the coast. And it starts to soften the edges a little bit. Now we can create another new layer above hard mix but below color. Let's rename this to water, and guess what, we're going to create some water. We're going to color pick the blue, make it a little bit darker, a little bit grayer, add some contrast, and use the paint bucket tool, and voila. Now you can add and change the color of this to your heart's content. This is just a tutorial just outlining some techniques. So in order to do the texture of the land, making undulating hills and so forth, Shadiversity, he used a method which seems a little bit too complicated, using channels and paths and selection tools, something like that. But I think I figured out something which creates a similar look. What we're going to do is go to the clouds layer. We're going to duplicate that, and let's call it land texture. We're going to move it on top, so we get something like this, what we've previously been worked on. So the next step is to go to image adjustments, shadow highlight, and basically we want a bit more shadow, just the shadow amount and just the highlight amount. Unfortunately this does it backwards. Highlights just the shadows, and shadow just the highlights. Basically it's kind of like a levels adjustment, just with a little bit more detail, a little bit more exposure to it. We're going to use something like that, and this is what we looked before, this is what it looked afterwards. A bit more detail, and we've got a nice areas of black and some areas of white. Brilliant. So we press OK, and we go to filter, sketch, bas relief, and basically we get an image like this, but we can fine tune it. I'm going to change the light from bottom to about top left, and detail somewhere to about 13, and the smoothness, let's choose about number 3. So bas relief detail 13, smoothness 3, light top left, and we got something similar to what he did without having to go to the channels and do all sorts of fancy stuff. Great, I'm happy with that. Press OK. And we got an image similar to that. And in this step we could go to image adjustments, desaturate it to turn it into grayscale, and so when we go to soft light it will just affect, it won't have any color effects. And to make it connect with the landmass, what we can do is hold the Alt button on our keyboard, put our cursor in between land texture and color. You see the cursor changes to this funny looking thing when we click it, and it's conform the shape of our landmass. Something cool like that. Now in his tutorial he went and did the same texture to the water. I don't necessarily agree with that. It just makes it a little bit too visually confusing for me anyway. One further thing we can do to landmass is go to our color layer, And if we double click the effects, since we already approved a stroke, we can do a bevel and emboss, and let's change the lighting a little bit somewhere like that, and just to add some effect like that. If you really want to create a texture for the water, there are numerous things you can do. You can add a layer style with a pattern overlay, and using either the default patterns or one that you create, setting it to a blend mode that you're happy with, you can create some texture like that. Or you can import an image, drag it in there, and then drag it on top of the water, and then put a soft light adjustment like that. But I think that looks pretty good. One thing I do agree with is his painting method. So we can add some, you know, some variety to our landmass by clicking on color. And for the color, we're just going to create a green, maybe a lighter green. And what we're going to do is lock the pixels. See this little button here? Lock transparent pixels. If we click that, and we get our paintbrush and make it a size like 250, when we're painting and we go to the edge, and when I see I'm trying to paint the water, but it's not allowing me to, because those are the transparent pixels. As you can see, it's locked, and so I won't be able to color them. And so I think I'm going to get the hardness to about soft, so I can blend it in more, as you can see, like that. Let's do some more color work, maybe a little bit of a brown, something like that, something like that, and maybe some here. And if I want to blend it in, I choose a similar color, and I just do that to blend it in. Okay, let's create some mountains. We're going to create a new layer, and let's going to call this mountain. And let's choose a grey color. And for the paint brushes, we're going to use a mix of the round brushes, and we're just going to paint some shapes here. We're going to alternate the colors, the sizes, sorry. And we're also going to use a dry media brush, something like soft oil pastel. And we're just going to create some shapes. This would add some rough texture to it. Again, we're going to adjust the size to it and just create something like that. So we're going to click on the mountains layer. We're going to create a new layer style. We're going to go to bevel and emboss. We're going to choose inner bevel, unclick, choose global light, and let's change it to something similar to what we've got for the landmass. When we're going to change the technique to chisel soft, and we can adjust the depth and the size, something like that. That will look good. And to create this, make this and to add some more detail to this, we can go to the eraser tool, and we can use a combination of soft brushes, so we can make it blend into the land a little bit more. And also dry media brushes, and we can just do some clicking here, make it all scraggly. We can adjust the sizes of it so we can create some channels and stuff. And in real time we can create our mountain range. Once we've got something that we are happy with, we can change the transfer mode of this mountain layer to soft light, and it'll bring the color of what's underneath here on what the color layer is. So after we set the mountain layer to soft light, it reforms to the color of what's underneath on the color layer. And if we choose a soft brush, and like a brown color we can paint the mountains in, something like that. To create snow, I'm going back to the mountain layer. I'm going to use eraser and I'm going to choose a rough brush, this soft oil pastel brush, make it a small size, and I'm going to just go to the top ridges of the mountain. Just make some ridges. Once that's done, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to choose a brush with a rough texture brush tip, soft oil pastel, and with a whitish color. I'm going to follow these crags and just paint in some snow, something like that. And to make it soft, we go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, play around with the settings, and a little bit too much soft, maybe about 2.5 for our purposes. And we can adjust the opacity just to make it blend a little bit better. Something like that. That is a basic technique for snow. Of course, you can come up with your own techniques. Now, to create, what I'm going to do to create the thick vegetation is use something else. What I'm going to do is select a color layer, use a tool called Quick Selection Tool. Maybe this darker area here, we're just going to roughly draw a shape like that, and we can edit that shape by holding Alt and choosing a smaller brush, color some bit here, make a much more natural shape, and create a rough selection, something like that, a rough shape like that. Once we've got our selection, we can go to select, save selection, let's call it rich forest, and go to filter, render clouds, and then once again we go to image, adjustments, shadow highlight, so adjust the amount of the shadows and adjust the amount of the highlights. We can go to filter, again we'll go to sketch and bas relief, and that looks pretty good, pretty dense. Press OK, change the blending mode to soft light, and we'll go back to the color layer. Let's choose a dark green color, something like that. Lock to transparent pixels, and since we got this area selected, it will only affect this area. Control D to unselect it. Once you're happy with that, we can also add a drop shadow to our rich forest. Select drop shadow among the layer styles, and it looks okay. Just to make it raised, quite similar to what he did here. And of course, if you're still not happy with the color, we can always create a new layer. Select the darker green color, use a fill bucket, the fill this layer, let's change the color to rich color. Hold down Alt key, left click, and it should conform to that. Change multiply and adjust the opacity like that. That is the second method on how to recolor certain areas of the map. create the rivers, what we can do is create a new layer above the land texture. Let's call this rivers. And we're going to use a round hard brush. Let's make it a little bit smaller, about 4 maybe. And basically I'm going to draw in the shape of some rivers. And they start, the rivers forming by going down the mountains and following to the path of least resistance to the coast. And some of them can be formed from the lakes, and we'll get some unique shapes like that. And what we can do is add a layer style of an inner shadow, and let's make it not as big. Change the distance to about 1, I suppose, and press OK. And basically what we're doing is creating some depth. Well, that is my tutorial on how to make a fantasy map. I decided to make one in response to Shadiversity's fantasy map tutorial. I thought it was a little bit too complicated for people who are new to Photoshop. These are of course techniques that I came up with, modified from his. You are free to make your own techniques and come up with something that suits your needs for your role-playing adventures or something else. And if you do come up with techniques, please tell me in the comments below. Thank you for watching.